Hello, my name is Brent Baum, and I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce you to a new mind-body approach called holographic memory resolution, which was designed to address memory triggers, flashbacks, nightmares, and to help resolve memory-based pain and pathology in the body mind. HMR is what we refer to as an emotional reframing technique, meaning that it specifically targets the emotional charge, the feelings, the frame of an experience that attaches us to memory without changing our historical perception. HMR is an integration of somatic, body-centered, color, and energy psychologies for the purposes of resolving various types of memory-based pain in the body mind. I come to this work from the addictions field, being a licensed substance abuse counselor for the state of Arizona. My original interest in the addictions field came while I was in graduate school in the seminary studying for Catholic priesthood, at which time I was told that 83% of the marriage cases I would ever counsel would be alcohol and drug related. Unfortunately, they only gave us a 3-hour lecture on the subject of addictions, and find that much of the training and counseling in our seminaries is woefully inadequate. I took the opportunity, however, when I had the summer free of 1980, to study addictions and actually facilitated my first Children of Alcoholics group in 1980. I was very moved by the stories of the children who were struggling to try to keep the steering wheel of the car on the road when mommy or daddy were intoxicated, and remembered making the commitment that if I ever had the opportunity to move more into the counseling field, that I would definitely study addictions. I had the opportunity to do so years later, and as I said, became a licensed counselor in the addictions field. Because I was not chemically dependent, however, in the first outpatient facility where I worked, I was placed working with the traumatized family members, those who had been impacted by the addict and their behaviors, and eventually worked with the addicts as well, but found myself very unprepared to try to address their traumatic memories. About that time in 1990, I came across the work of a psychotherapist named David Grove from New Zealand, who observed something that I believe changes medicine and the psychopathology model as we know it. Though it may seem insignificant at first, what he observed is that we always, subconsciously and automatically pause consciousness at the millisecond prior to overwhelm, that our flashbacks and nightmares are largely based on a millisecond of paused consciousness, and that this moment is always a protective act. The flashback of the Vietnam vet was of the sights, sounds, smells in the jungle the millisecond before the bomb went off. It doesn't mean that abuse or trauma hasn't begun, but it means that when your nervous system reaches the point of overwhelm, this protective mechanism kicks in and we actually can slow. Many of us have had that experience of going into slow motion before a trauma or a tragedy. But not only do we go into slow motion, but we can actually pause the movie, pause the event for a millisecond, at which point our adrenals kick in, fight, flight, freeze kicks in, hits us with our most powerful hormone, adrenaline, and we survive into present time. The problem is, of course, that when consciousness is paused, we now know from SPECT scans of the brain, single photon emission computed tomography scanners, that we actually store the same brainwave frequencies, the same patterns, and the same state of physiological pain or distress as the original moment of encoding. One of the breakthroughs in realizing that trauma, level 1 trauma, single moment trauma, is a precise millisecond, gave us the ability to target that in order to try to achieve effective resolution of these symptoms. David Grove developed a 9-question tracking approach, which was used by some other organizations, as I discovered previously, which allowed us to focus on the body in order to identify the precise moment of encoding. Milton Erickson and David Cheek, the fathers of modern hypnosis, believed that there had to be a somatic access feature, a way of talking to the body that would accelerate trance work. And what I mean by that is a trauma, by definition, is a spontaneous state of self-hypnosis, a protective act, a trance, an altered state of consciousness that the body creates to protect itself. It's not a choice, it's done for us automatically and in the subconscious. At moments of overwhelm, the entire experience is captured and stored as a single container of memory. Not only is it a millisecond, but we discovered from our neurophysiologists like Carl Pribram that the hologram-like nature of memory, what Carl Pribram later termed holonomic memory, following the laws and rules of a hologram, means that we can take an entire traumatic event and reduce it to a single fragment. Because in physics, every fragment of a hologram contains the whole. Originally, Pribram said that all of our memories are holograms, but later said, no, the migraine would then be distributed equally, or the pain throughout the system, and therefore he revised his concept and called memory in the body-mind holonomic. It stored sites specifically. And Grove's language for tracking was very specific at helping us identify when, where, how that moment of encoding occurred. When I experienced the technique with Grove back around 1980, I became a little frustrated because the solution approach that he used didn't work for myself, didn't work for me. And so I actually modified that technique and later added 3 components which I will share with you in this presentation. When we freeze and pause consciousness, we freeze all of the affect, the pain, and the experience of that particular moment. Our goal, therefore, was to find a language to identify that moment and establish safety. When I experienced the technique with Groves, I then used some of my addictions training and actually appealed to my adult self in present time awareness for the solution. When I did that, the solution was immediate and effective, and I released the pain of the original memory. We also discovered that the language that we needed to use in order to create safety must speak to both the physical body and the emotional body, because we discovered that even if we lose an organ or a limb in the physical body, if the memory is preserved intact as a hologram within the system, we need to be able to speak effectively to the whole system. And that's where the color psychology piece came in. Color is an infinite language, and as I discovered, was our first language as a child for emotional safety outside the womb. The way part of this technique developed, therefore, that I adapted, was the realization that the colors you and I see for our memories are unique to our 7-color projection system. 7 major nerve plexes functioning at all moments, which create somehow a 3-dimensional holographic or holonomic movie of our experiences. At moments of overwhelm, therefore, we pause the movie and contain it in the only place we can, in our body mind. From somatic psychology, we now know that the body mind possesses 1,000 neurons per square inch, so memory is not stored only in our brain. But we discovered that among our primary processors are the brain, the heart, and the gut. Of the 3, the heart being the strongest, 60 times stronger than the brain, and the stomach, or gut, in fact, having more neurons than our entire spinal cord. In fact, we've discovered that a lot of our early childhood anxiety is first processed in the gut and the stomach, and only later makes its way to short-term or long-term storage in the brain. Some traumas to the head, in fact, leave us without any conscious memory or evidence of storage in the brain, but what we do know is, as Bessel van der Kolk's most recent work tells us, the body keeps the score. The head injury may have erased the memory, may be unrecoverable, but the site in the body can still be identified and emotionally reframed. We refer to this work as body-centered, client-centered emotional reframing, because your body alone knows the frequencies, the moment of freezing, the color frequencies that we're missing, and what's needed in order to create safety and a solution. An example of the use of color psychology in art therapy with children and how we confirmed this type of technique was the fact that, as you and I already know, a child will almost always go to reds and blacks to depict physical or sexual abuse events. They may not have the words for the event as a young child, but they can draw a picture. If you have them redraw that picture, they will always go and correct the image with mommy and daddy present, or safety, or no accident, no injury, no bullying. They will always choose their bright, nurturing colors. If you move a color of the holonomic memory, remember what we said, every fragment of a hologram contains the whole thing. This is how many of our therapies work, whether it's breath work, color, sound, vibration. If we move a color or feeling from the safe scene through the part of the body holding the original icon of tension, in physics, when we take red and black and add all of the missing colors, what do we get? We get white light. And so the goal of the process is not to change memory. It's not to change your history. It's to prove to the body mind that we can create safety in present time, move the feeling of safety through the part of the body still holding on to the old icon of memory, and demonstrate that if we can move that icon of safety through the body, and the icon contains the corrected image, when we can move safety through the body says, oh, look, we're not in the original accident. We're not in the basement. We're not in the car accident. We're not in the moment of sexual or physical abuse. Our goal, therefore, is not to change history. It's simply to demonstrate to the body mind that we're not still trapped in the history. And that's how my work originally developed. Color was then used as an anchoring mechanism. I did some archaeology work in the summer of 1984 with NASA, having done archaeology from 1979 to 1992, mostly during summers. As a child, I had wanted to be an archaeologist. During that research project at the John C. Stennis Space Center in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, working with Tom Seaver, NASA's archaeologist, I also discovered that all man-made objects have a unique spectral signature. Therefore, you, with your 7 nerve centers, your specific body, your DNA, your personal history, what you ate today, our clothing, all of the features of our daily existence, the frequencies at each of our nerve centers are obviously unique. Therefore, in order to establish safety, the colors need to be transmitted from your 5% conscious survivor self to the 95% subconscious body mind to say, thank you for holding on to this, but look, I can now create safety and demonstrate that I can create safety by moving the feeling of the safe image through my body at the site where the original pain occurred. When I did that for the first time, between 1982 and 1984, I was shocked at the percentage of migraines, panic attacks, some seizure disorders, a number of allergies, a lot of chronic pain, much that we label depression and anxiety resolved and did not return to the body mind. In cases where there still was pain, we often found there were more memories, complex layered memories, or there might have been, in fact, nerve damage or physical damage. This technique works very well with memory-based pain. I've had the privilege of working with over 150,000 memories over these last few decades, and have also 53 certified healthcare professionals using the technique at the time of this recording, and over 1,200 in training. My goal is to have us doing this technique on ourselves as a kind of mindfulness about memory on a regular basis. Another breakthrough that came in with the development of this work is the fact that I discovered a point near C7 that enhances and accelerates access to memory. Carl Pribram was correct. All of our senses function in a hologram-like manner, and having replicated this approach many, many times, we can confirm that your body is able to store vast quantities of data, unlimited data, throughout the body mind. A little bit of an advantage that I had is that I grew up with a mother who was an empath, though I didn't know the term at the time. My mother was a person who could feel when we were in car accidents and injuries, feel a physical pain in her body, would usually know which child was injured, would write the time down, say a prayer for you, and wait for you to call. She knew the time of my car accident. She knew the time when my sister began to have a miscarriage. She called the veterans home where my brother lived for half of his life and asked what had just happened to him. And they stated that the ambulance was on the way, that he had broken his ankle, but she was not supposed to have been called until they had x-rays and eliminated a heart attack, stroke, or TIA. She, of course, felt the moment when it happened and actually beat the ambulance to the building. In 1983, when she died, I was in school in the seminary in Italy, and I felt the moment of her passing. It was almost 9 years later before I realized that if I was sitting in proximity to a client and they went into a migraine or some type of violent memory, I would feel some of the pain from that event. As I began to approach that and find that I could in fact confirm the release of memory from the client's body as they felt the same, I was able to use that ability to further refine the technique. In 1994, about 2 years later, I was working with a client who fell on ice and had a concussion and subsequent migraines. When she reframed the migraine, I was near her head and felt the pain release from her head at that time, asked her about the migraine, and she stated that it had just left at the same moment that I felt it. As I was scanning the back of her head, having taken some training in acupressure and also some healing touch training, in Arizona, by the way, we discovered, and many states, you can place a hand at one point, just don't move it, or that would be a massage and requires a different license. Placing one hand near C7 at the time, I noticed a pain, and there was no associated memory with that site. In 1994 at Cottonwood Treatment Centers, I started scanning all of the patients and discovered they all had the same pain at C7. Eventually, I placed my hand on that site, knowing that it was also the grounding point where a mother places her hand to anchor an infant's neck and spine for safety. It's where animals often pick up their young to move them to safety. And eventually, doing measurements on that process about 6 years later, discovered that when you and I place our hand on a child, friend, or loved one's shoulder, C7, cervical vertebra 7 area, we're running a slight current, a white light, from our hands into an opening that accesses the dorsal channel of the spine. When we do so, and we measured this in 2000 for the first time, your conscious mind goes to alpha, subconscious goes to theta, visual processing, and we see something that's similar to rapid eye movement, only we're conscious during this process. There's much published data on alpha-theta research. Most treatment centers in the country have sought for decades an approach that would allow, for instance, a recovering addict to remain calm while being able to visualize, access memory, and release the charge of pain without having to relive the event. With the discovery of alpha-theta in 1994 and a bit of support to the client's nervous system when touch was permitted, appropriate, or allowed, it isn't always required or necessary. But when we did that, the whole technique became 5 to 10 times faster, and people that normally could not access memory or be hypnotized could do this particular technique. In fact, the body began mapping a series of memories in many cases, changing the pain site location and revealing to us the sequence of memories that contributed to the migraine condition, the growing anxiety, depression as a series of layered memories, and even many types of chronic pain conditions. We discovered with cancer, with car accidents, with injuries, much of the pain in the nervous system was not from the immediate diagnosis disease itself, but from the weakening of the immune system that occurred from traumas earlier in their history. So it's no longer an either-or situation when we have conditions, bipolar disorders, chronic pain conditions, nerve damage, even cancers. It's extremely helpful to reframe the memories that precede such conditions or accompany such conditions, because in a few years we'll have known for a century that when we access an unresolved trauma or stress moment, that adrenaline goes up to protect us, and when adrenaline rises, T cell and immunity go down. As a result of that, anything that we can do to resolve our stress moments, to stay ahead of these accumulations of our stress, anxiety, to resolve the T-1 trauma scenes of the past, can boost our immune system and even help to resolve genetic, or to ease the symptoms, I should say, of genetic, environmental, and other kinds of physiologically based illnesses. In many cases, we assume that the pain in our bodies, even with the best information provided by the medical profession, is in fact physiological damage. But I'd like to share with you a case which demonstrates the technique and how this process works. Around 1996, I had a client come to me at the end of a lecture at Cottonwood Treatment Center, where I was the director of their trauma program for a number of years. And the client came up to me after the lecture and said, "I'm thinking about leaving treatment." And I said, "Why is that?" She said, "I have nerve damage in my legs from a car accident when I was 7, and they want to keep me here for 30 days, teach me all about addictions, detox me from the current narcotic, and then send me home with a new one." She said, "What's the point? I'm going to be addicted to the new narcotic. There are no non-addictive narcotics for my nerve pain." She said, "Why should I stay and spend all this money just to become an addict once again?" I said, "I see your point, but what's your question?" She said, "You said something I've never heard before. You said that if the pain in my body was from a traumatic scene, image, or event, that T-1 scene could be maintaining some of the pain. The post-traumatic stress is maintaining my pain, and it may not all be nerve damage." I said, "That could be true, but I make no promises. It's possible that 100% of your pain is nerve damage." She said, "Well, I'll take that chance and stay for another day." So she got an order from a psychiatrist, came into my office the next day, and I began the technique, which always begins with, when you think of the event, where do you feel this in your physical body? She said, "My legs." Is it inside or outside? That question, by the way, we now know activates 13 trillion brain cells, and you scan your body in a matter of seconds. She said, "It's both, inside and outside my legs." And does it have a shape, size, or color? Yes, it's big black boulders, she stated. Does it have, do the big black boulders have a weight, temperature, or texture? She said, yes, cold and heavy. And in the technique, even doing it on yourself, you repeat back the last few items and create an affective or emotional bridge between the known and the next question. So I said, so you have big black boulders inside and outside your legs. Do they have a weight, temperature, texture? Yes, cold and heavy. And is there anything else about them? Yes, they hurt. When you have a pain statement, often we have the icon of memory. And if it can be sketched or drawn, it often is memory-based. The question that I developed that was different from Grove's original tracking and closer to Milton Erickson's conditional tense in the use of trance work, the question I developed was, how young might you be when you first feel this big, black, boulder-like heavy pain in your legs, inside and out? She said, I'm 7. Now, the way memory surfaces usually is age, location, event, and then the feeling that makes us freeze. So I said, you're about 7. Can you see where you are when you're 7? And you have this big, black, heavy weight in your legs like this. I'm lying by the interstate. We've been in an accident. Well, that's where the event got interesting, because most of us freeze, and most of my clients freeze prior to impact, a millisecond prior to overwhelm. In some cases, however, we discover that the trauma isn't the physical event. It often is how the caregivers handle or mishandle the event, which is why we refer to this as body-centered, client-centered therapy. The client identifies, their body identifies T-1. So I said, so you're 7, you're lying by the interstate, what happens next? My legs are crushed and I can't move to get help. That's a physical pain statement. It's not the emotional statement. We're not at T-1. So I said, what happens then? She said, everyone is unconscious but me. What happens next when everyone is unconscious? She said, cars are passing by. And I was beginning to wonder where the process was going, and I said, trusting the client, what happens next? She says, no one is stopping to help us. What happens then when no one's stopping to help? She said, I'm afraid we're all going to die. and we can hear in her voice the moment of freezing. Just in case, because in such a severe accident there can be several T-1 moments of encoding that the body will highlight or indicate for us, I said, was there anything worse that happened after this? Oh no, everyone was fine, but I numbed out and went into slow motion from that time forward, which means the adrenaline hit, endorphins and enkephalins are released that protect us at such moments, and she survived. So the solution that I came up with was, if the adult you could go back and change this scene, what would you like to see happen? She said, oh, that's easy. Somebody would get on the brick, the old mobile phones, and call for help. I said, take all the time you need to show that you can create that safety and that image, and let me know when you're in the hospital or when you're safe. And she took a few moments to do that. I said, take all the time you need to create safety and let me know when you have it. She said, I can see it now. We're all at the hospital. I said, is there anything else that she needs? She said, yes, strawberry swirl ice cream. And I was like, what does she need that for? She said, when she had her tonsils out at 3, she had a good hospital experience, so she wants strawberry swirl ice cream. In my mind, I'm thinking the days of therapist-centered therapy have ended. I almost forgot to ask about the ice cream. The scene would have been incomplete. So I said, let me know when you have the scene just the way you want it. She said, I have it. And in terms of calling this emotional reframing, what I mean is we had to develop a mechanism to transmit the safe image to the body mind. And literally using the concepts from cognitive reframing, we borrowed the term and basically applied brainwave frequency. The colors you see for your memories are not mine, and therefore the colors she will see in the frame of her picture are the colors that will establish safety in the body mind. I simply asked, what color frame do you see around the image of your 7-year-old self in the hospital with her ice cream? And she said, I see gold and green. Let's move the gold and green through your entire body, especially through your legs where you felt the pain. She said, yes, I moved that all the way through. And then I said, what is your pain level? She said, 0. I said, let's stand up and walk around. Assuming that she wouldn't feel the nerve damage until she moved, as she's walking around, I said, what's your pain level? She said, 0. I said, it must be intermittent nerve damage. How long has it been since you had no pain in your legs? And she said, 37 years. At which point she became a bit upset, realizing that the pain in her legs was entirely trance-based pain. Although I said, give it 2 or 3 days, because the effects of the endorphins and enkephalins in the nervous system is that when I've worked with cancer patients, if the pain returns after 2 or 3 days, we either have additional memories, or there may be some other type of pathology, or in fact you may have nerve damage. In this case, however, the pain in her legs never returned. This is a woman who was given narcotics for 37 years for what was entirely trance-based pain from the memory in the 95% subconscious. Since that time, I probably work weekly with individuals who have been medicated, who are taking pain pills, antidepressants for what clearly turns out to be memory-based pain. That is not to say that there is not a place for all of the traditional allopathic approaches or for the medications which have kept us alive, but it's certainly worth our while to check and see if the pain in our body-mind through this type of questioning sequence is in fact perhaps memory-based. What I'm talking about this work is teaching us all a kind of mindfulness about memory-based pain. I'd like to see parents teaching it to their children. Can you do the technique on yourself? I'll share with you a final story of how I did it on myself. So I had a cyst in my left ear for a number of years. In my mind I said, well, it's not life-threatening and it's probably not a memory. And then I corrected myself and said, don't do this. It could very well be some type of a memory. So I gave myself the benefit of the doubt. When I feel this pain, where do I feel it? My ear. Inside or outside? Both. Does it have a shape, size, or color? And you often get a very light impression, almost as though you're making it up. But I encourage you to trust yourself. So I said, does it have a shape, size, or color? Yes, I see kind of a red-black marble. Does it have a weight? temperature, texture. It's a little hot and it's hard and it throbs sometimes. Anything else about it? Yes, it hurts. How young might I be when I first feel this marble-sized pain in my ear like this? And I heard the number 10. I said, where might I be when I'm 10 and I'm feeling this? I heard altar boy meeting. And what happens next when you're at an altar boy meeting? And suddenly it came flooding back. I was in that third category of protection that we refer to as traumatic amnesia or delayed recall. And sometimes until we focus on that part of the body, the memory does not surface. Our body is amazing in its protective mechanisms. So I said, what happens next when I'm at an altar boy meeting and I'm 10? And suddenly I remembered one of the class bullies used to sit behind me and pluck me on the ear repeatedly at that same site. And suddenly it all came back to me. He did it repeatedly at the altar boy meeting, at which point I jumped out of my chair and virtually attacked him, after which point I don't remember anything because the Monsignor, who at the time looked a bit like Herman Munster, stood up, came over, and interrupted our dispute. But he never touched my ear again. However, by that time, I assure you, the ear was already traumatized. So in my mind I said, if I could change this, what would I like to see happen? Well, I knew that this individual's father was involved in politics, actually. In fact, was also a deputy sheriff, and said it's time for me to reframe this. I gave him a sober father without a temper, had him be kind to his children, at which point this individual and a number of other friends pictured all of us getting along and playing together, and the reframe of that particular memory, the color of the frame, was yellow and green. Upon moving my personal colors, and green is often resolution of anger, and the neutralization of red is physical healing. Yellow is about relationships, harmony, interconnectedness, from my work with over 150,000 memories. When I moved the yellow and green colors through my ear for the next few days, in 3 days it was shrinking, by about 5 days to a week it was gone. All that remains is a bit of scar tissue, and it's never bothered me since. So can you heal yourself? I do it on my own stress headaches. I do it on other issues in my own life. I've had people use color alone to resolve cysts or other kinds of growths in their body. So I encourage you, as David Grove from New Zealand originally encouraged us to do. He was of Maori descent and believed in empowering people to heal themselves from within. And I believe we're reaching an age where we're encouraging you to access the healer within yourself. From my background and having served for some time as a Catholic priest, I can tell you all the mystical traditions agree that the frequencies, the light that we seek in all of these spiritual traditions is within us. And whether you're spiritually minded or not, I can assure you there's not a client I've ever worked with over the years who could not, through a bit of focusing, access and identify the missing frequencies that were needed to create safety. Therefore, within each of us, on some level, we have the capacity to identify, if only for a millisecond, what safety and what perfect love really is. This technique, as I've said, is a body-centered, client-centered focusing technique. I affectionately call it facilitated self-dehypnosis, in that those that I train, parents, educators, therapists, neurologists, psychiatrists, anesthesiologists, I encourage them to identify the fact that we are facilitating, helping you take yourself out of trance. Sometimes we need a little extra help to do that, to create sufficient safety. If in attempting to do such simple reframing on yourself, you're interrupted, cannot proceed, please find for yourself an effective therapist that can do these kinds of practices with you, that can do effective trance work or emotional reframing. There are many techniques that help to reduce the emotional charge of memory. My goal all along, however, was to bring us to baseline zero and to prove definitively to the body-mind that you're not still trapped in the past. If you have questions about this material, about where I have practitioners throughout the world, please visit my website, healingdimensions.com. You can also visit our research site, which is michaelsgift.org, or visit Amazon Smile on our behalf. I also practice in the northwest of Tucson in a private practice and am frequently at Miraval, miravalresorts.com. If you have questions about this technique, please check out the articles and the information on the website. There's also a video summarizing in a bit more detail the 7 breakthroughs that led to the development of my work. My 3 books are also available through the website. Thank you for your time and attention.